Tokugawa Dono, I think it would be interesting to recount how we proceeded leading up to the battles of Toba and Fushimi. Yes, Mr. Exigo. It is significant for me to hear the whole story again myself. Please begin. Now, I suppose the first thing I must talk about is the return of the Grand Council of State. Your handing back of power to the Emperor was a major prelude to this battle, Mr. Kiki. Yes, that is correct. I made the decision to return the Grand Council of State in order to prevent the loss of authority of the shogunate and to end the opposition to the shogunate. However, the chaos that followed was more than I had anticipated. After that Grand Seihoken, we had to hasten the establishment of a new national government and establish the authority of the government forces in Kyoto. We had to take action to ensure the authority of the new government. Saigo-san, how did you and your people plan to seize control of Kyoto at that time? Through our Kyoto guardianship, we maintained the security of Kyoto and further strengthened the deployment of the government forces. In doing so, we laid the groundwork for the effective promotion of the new government's policies. I see. So how did the subsequent military developments develop? On the first day of the year 1868, the new government issued a great decree of restoration of the monarchy. This was a great morale booster for the soldiers of the various clans, as it demonstrated both domestically and internationally our legitimacy as a new government army. So that issue led to a decisive confrontation with the shogunate forces. That is correct. We could not allow the shogunate forces to remain in Kyoto, and on January 3, I left Kyoto for Fushimi with a contingent of Satsuma clan soldiers. What was the initial situation at Fushimi, where the government and shogunate forces clashed for the first time? The first clash occurred near Fushimi Castle. The shogunate forces initially had the upper hand, but we responded with modern equipment and tactics. It must have been a tough opponent for the shogunate forces. Yes, but gradually the superiority of the government forces became apparent, and by January 4 the Fushimi Castle was completely overrun. With that, the shogunate forces suffered a heavy defeat and you were forced to retreat to Edo. That defeat was a fatal blow to my political life, wasn't it? Saigo-san, please tell me again how important that victory was for the new government. Its victory established the authority of the new government and paved the way for the Meiji Restoration. This was a major step toward the modernization of Japan and a necessary battle to advance toward our goal of a nation centered on the imperial family. Mr. Saigo, there have been many conflicts between you and us, but it was definitely you who opened the gate to a new era. Lord Tokugawa, we look back to the past and forward to the future. It is our duty to do so. There is still much to learn from this battle. That is correct. Mr. Saigo, I hope we can continue to deepen our understanding through this kind of dialogue. Yes, of course. Let our experience serve as a lesson for the next generation. Saigo, I think we need to share once again the real reason why the battle took place and our thoughts from our perspective. Yes, Lord Kiki, I agree. I, too, may gain a new understanding by hearing the whole story again. Please begin. First of all, the great restoration of Japan, which was done by my hand, was an answer to the internal and external pressures that the shogunate was facing. After the arrival of Perry, we were forced to open our country to the outside world, and with the increasing pressure from other powers, we decided that the shogunate system could not protect the country. However, that grand restoration of power was regarded as a de facto relinquishment of power, and many clans questioned the true intentions of the government. What were your thoughts on this point, Lord Kiki? I believed that rule by the emperor would lead to national stability. However, contrary to my intention, it is undeniable that the political vacuum after the Inquisition led to new turmoil. To fill the void, we, the government forces, took control of Kyoto and tried to establish a new order. This ultimately led to the battle. What measures did you take, Yoshinobu? We left Kyoto and attempted to explain the true intentions of the Grand Council of State and rally support, but we were unable to respond to the rapid movements of the new government. We were then on the defensive as the military pressure from the clans, especially Satsuma and Choshu, increased. It could be said that the challenge to the authority of the shogunate justified our actions, but what were the feelings of Lord Kiki at that time? As shogun of the shogunate, I wanted above all else the stability of the country. But I also felt the need for change to meet the demands of the new era. This caused very mixed emotions. That is the very agony of an era in which old and new values intersect. But in the end, the battle was fought, and what decisions were made on the part of the shogunate in the process leading up to that point? We were seeking a negotiated settlement until the very end. When we realized the futility of this, the new government forces were already closing in on Kyoto. I now believe that war was our inevitable fate. Although it is fate, it is an unavoidable fact that much blood has been spilled. What responsibility do you feel for this? I feel responsible for all of it. As a shogun and as a human being, I deeply regret the loss of so many lives. It is because of that regret that we are talking about this now. The transition to a new era was inevitable, but the pain of the process is also part of our history. Yes, that is correct. Mr. Saigo, I hope that our dialogue will serve as a lesson for the future. I hope so too. There is no end to what we can learn from history, is there? Now, before we move on, let's look back at what we talked about today. Tokugawa Dono, since the Battle of Toba Fushimi, Japan has undergone a great transformation over this time. I would like to hear your views on the impact the battle had. Yes, Saigo. That battle marked the end for my shogunate and the beginning of a new era. I believe that the change in political structure, in particular, had a great impact on the subsequent development of Japan. That is correct. Our government forces succeeded in establishing a government centered on the emperor. This marked the end of the long-running Bakuhan system and the establishment of a centralized state structure. I understand now that the change was necessary for the country. However, at the time there was much apprehension and resistance. In particular, there was a great fear of the loss of the role of the shogunate. Certainly, there must have been great anxiety on the part of the shogunate. However, under the new government, Japan was able to rapidly modernize. This is one major achievement. Yes, the introduction of Western technology and thought has helped Japan to gain a new status in the international community. That is one bright outcome of the battle. However, it also came at a cost. It is true that many clan members and samurai suffered from the inability to adapt to the new era. We must always consider how our decisions affected their lives. I have deeply regretted this point. The transition to the new system has been a great challenge for many of us. We are especially responsible for the hardships of those who lost their positions. So even after the battle was over, it was important to deal with the aftermath. The new government was responsible for how its policies would affect the lives of each and every citizen. Yes, for this reason it is important that we look back and learn from our history. We should continue to discuss not only the Battle of Toba Fushimi, but also how the subsequent responses were carried out. That is exactly right. History teaches us many lessons. It is our role to apply them to the future. And our most important task is to pass on those lessons to the next generation. Mr. Saigo, I hope that this dialogue today will help us to do so. I feel the same way, Lord Kiki. Let us together take responsibility for how we shape our future through history. Yoshinobu, I believe that the decisions we took in the Battle of Toba and Fushimi were inevitable from our respective standpoints. Saigo, I have to admit that I was torn between two things. I agonized between my responsibility as a shogun of the shogunate and whether I should accept the changes of the times. The fact that we have come to fight is in itself a great burden on my mind. I understand that much effort was made to avoid fighting. I have also had the thought many times that the transition to a new era could be accomplished without the shedding of blood. However, we had to resort to force because there was a deep rift between us that could not be resolved. With the government forces led by Saigo-san, my ideal of a peaceful resolution could not be achieved. I have deeply regretted this point. I have wondered many times after the war whether there was a way to resolve the issue through more dialogue, even if it were a matter of, what if? When the battle is over, the most painful thing is that so many lives were lost. I must live with that. I, too, carry the same burden. Many young people lost their lives in this war, even though it was to open a new era. Whenever I face this fact, my heart becomes heavier. Mr. Saigo, I feel it is our responsibility to search for answers to what we should learn and pass on to future generations. That's right. There are endless lessons to be learned from the battle. It is important that we recount our experiences for the future. We must not forget the lives and thoughts of the individual people behind the battles. To convey the truth about what each of these people felt and how they acted will enhance the true value of history. That is exactly right. Not only the political maneuvering leading up to the war, but also the real voices of the people of that time must be cherished as part of our history. Mr. Exigo, I hope that our dialogue will contribute to understanding and reconciliation. I too hope so. Dear Mr. Kiki, let us strive to make our history a bridge to the future. Dear Mr. Tokugawa, can you tell us about the social changes that the battles of Toba and Fushimi brought to our nation of Japan from your point of view? Indeed, the battle had a tremendous impact on the social structure of Japan. In particular, the shift to a centralized system of government has greatly reduced the power of local clans, hasn't it? That is correct. Centralization of power enabled the centralization of national policy and efficient state management. However, it also led to the loss of local autonomy and the dissatisfaction of many clansmen. Yes, the changes had a major impact on the clan's economy. The clan heads were no longer able to manage their own finances independently, and were forced to follow the policies of the central government. Furthermore, from an economic perspective, the Battle of Toba-Fushimi contributed to the acceleration of modernization. Western technologies and institutions were introduced, and the Industrial Revolution got underway. The Industrial Revolution was made possible in large part due to external pressure at the end of the Edo period. To counter the threat of Western powers, Japan needed to rapidly modernize. Certainly, that external pressure encouraged the opening of the country and was the driving force that changed the very structure of the economy. However, it also increased social instability. This instability had a direct impact on the lives of the populace. The new taxation system and trade liberalization were burdensome for many of the people. After the fighting ended and a new government was established, there was a mixture of anticipation and anxiety among the general public about the new era. In particular, the elimination of the traditional status system was a major change. The elimination of the status system was certainly welcomed by some, but it also caused many people to lose sight of their own identity because it undermined the old values. On the cultural front, Western influence became more pronounced. From dress and architecture to the educational system, Japan's unique traditions were threatened. However, it is also true that this westernization greatly facilitated Japan's modernization in terms of scientific and technological advances and the spread of education. This modernization eventually became the cornerstone of Japan's transformation into a strong nation that could compete in the international community. Indeed, while the achievements have been great, much has been lost in the process. We must not forget the aspects of tradition and culture that were sacrificed. The changes that have taken place since the battle have had a multifaceted impact on Japan as a whole. It was not merely economic and political, but also deeply engraved in the hearts and minds of the people. How to accept this change of heart and how to pass it on to the next generation is an important issue for us. That's right, there are endless lessons to be learned from history. I hope that our experience will guide us in the future. Mr. Kiki, now is the time for us to talk about the truth about the Battle of Toba and Fushimi, just for us. Yes, Saigo. Maybe now I can speak honestly about how much weight that battle held for both of us. Let me tell you, the night before the battle, I could not sleep because of indescribable anxiety and nervousness. No other battle has made me feel that the future of Japan was at stake so much. Me, too, Saigo. In going into that battle, I felt the pressure not as a shogun of the shogunate, but as an individual. At that moment when the battle began, I just knew that this would change everything. But who knew at that moment whether it would turn out for the better or for the worse? To tell the truth, I had hoped that whatever the outcome of that battle, it would end in some way. Because the persistent uncertainty was hurting the country. I wanted a new era, but I also knew that it would involve many sacrifices. It was heartbreaking to see so many young men and women fall in battle. Me too, Saigo. The soldiers of the shogunate were also fighting for justice in their own way. When I think of that fact, I am filled with deep sadness. In building a new government after the war, I have always faced the memory of that battle. It has always been the force that kept me moving forward. I spent a long time thinking about how I should spend the rest of my life as a loser. Since that battle, we have experienced and learned much. It is now the foundation for a new relationship. Saigo, we are now trying to move beyond our past conflicts and understand each other. This may be the greatest achievement of that battle. That may indeed be the case. Kiki Dono, it is exciting to think of the possibilities of what our dialogue could bring about in the future. I feel the same way, Saigo. I hope that our experience will serve as a lesson to future generations and help them build a better future. Thank you very much for your kind attention today, Mr. Kiki. I hope our talk will be of some help to you, our readers. Yes, Mr. Exigo. Dear readers, I hope that the path we have taken and the dialogue we have had today will help you to understand. Thank you very much.